Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode of Hallowed Be Thy Game. Ren here, and today I'm going to be sharing with you my favorite games from the year 2021. I have not played every game, JRPG, or Metroidvania that has released this year. This may come as a shock to people, but channels that have less than 1,000 subs don't get anything for free. So I paid for everything I played this year, and a lot of big releases this year like Tales of Arise, Metroid Dread, SMT5 that I wanted the collector's edition for, which cuts into my adventurous budget. However, I do want to let you know that games that are on the slate to be played but haven't been played yet would be Neo, The World Ends With You, and Atelier Ryza 2. I am confident I'm going to love those games, but unfortunately, I wasn't able to get to them this year. And coming in at number 5, I have to give it to Scarlet Nexus. This game was on my radar. I had hopes for it. I knew it was going to be a fun game. I just didn't expect how much fun I was going to have with Scarlet Nexus. I felt like the combat, pacing, and balance was right on point. I thought the characters were lovable. I had a blast hanging out with the team. I only felt the need to play through the story once. I did not go back and play it from the second story route perspective. I'm looking forward to going back and doing that in the future. However, I do feel I had a complete and wonderful experience with a single playthrough. Again, the action was just on point. One of my favorite things about the combat system was how you had your party members and they essentially offered buffs and modifiers to your abilities. I had an absolute blast playing with this. In fact, this was my first in-depth combat showcase I've ever done on the channel. And it was such an honor to be able to give that to Scarlet Nexus. I'm looking forward to doing more showcases like that, just because that's the part of games I love, is kind of the numbers aspect of it and the kind of interplay and the ebb and flow of combat. So had an absolute blast with that. However, there was 4 other games that I just had that much more fun with. And I want to point this out that if I was to do a graded tier list for this video, all of these games would be A and above. I really just, over the years, I'm not the youngest gamer out there, but over the years I've been able to kind of hone what kind of games I love. And you're going to be seeing on this channel kind of like a circular pattern. I go turn-based RPGs, action RPGs, Metroidvanias, and then there'll be a visual novel thrown in there for good measure along with it. But now coming in at the number 4 slot, I have to give it to Persona 5 Strikers. This is a game that I have been so hyped for, and it absolutely lived up to the hype for me. I had a little bit of concerns at first. I didn't know how a Muso game was going to work with the Persona formula. However, I want to give it to the combat design team for Strikers. They absolutely elevated this above just a typical Muso game where you're just mowing down hordes of enemies. The interplay and integration of the press turn battle system into an action gameplay format was seamless. And not only that, it was super enjoyable. I had a blast going through this game's story. I thought they did the style and visual flair of the Phantom Thieves were just right on point, absolutely true to the Persona 5 Royal, and Persona 5 in general. Now, I want to let you know, Persona 5 is arguably my favorite game of all time. Atlas is my favorite developers. I love them so much. Them and FromSoft are right up there, but I think Atlas is my number 1 just because they just put out banger after banger, and they have a huge catalog of games I'm just crazy about. Now, I say that because as much as I love Persona 5, I was worried about how a seemingly sequel spin-off that's not a turn-based game would perform. My fears were just unfounded. It was an absolute joy to play. The second I beat it, I can't wait to dive back into it on harder difficulties. I can't recommend it enough. Even if you don't like Muso games, this is more of an action JRPG than a Muso game, so definitely worth a playthrough. Now, in picking my top 3 games of 2021, this has been one of the most brutal processes I could ever think. I mean, we're talking about the most minute of differences that can kind of bump a game up or bump a game down. So when I say that my top 3 games could literally be my game of the year, I mean that. However, I am going to attempt to put these in an order. When I was going down, and I kind of set myself a list because, I don't typically do a traditional review on the channel. If you've seen any of my reviews on the channel, they kind of work a little different. They're a lot more drawn out, and they're a lot more like go into very deep detail. And that's the way I enjoy games. I just love delving into those deeper systems and just immersing myself in the experience. I got completely lost in all 3 of these games. However, when I break it down to combat, story, characters, music, and replay value, I kind of noticed that action RPGs and turn-based RPGs are on a different level of enjoyment than Metroidvanias for me. And that is the most minute of details because they're definitely my 3 favorite series and genres of games. But Metroid Dread, I'm going to put in the number 3 slot. Absolutely a killer entry. And in terms of the Game of the Year awards, I hope it wins Game of the Year because out of the nominees, it's clearly number 1 for me. The combat was smooth and on point. The exploration was just fluid, fast-paced. The boss fights were iconic, difficult. It challenged you to just absolutely just channel Samus and just become that bounty hunter of legend. An absolute joy to play, as with all of these games. Samus, oh my god. Some of the most epic moments of gaming happened here. I had a blast with it. The music I thought was really good. And the replay value is definitely there. Definitely there for Metroid Dread. However, there's 2 games that, if I'm true to myself, are just a tier above that. And that's between Tales of Arise and SMT5. These are my top 2 games of the year. I have gone back and forth countless times between which one of these is my number 1. Just to kind of give you my history with these 2 games this year, I platinumed Tales of Arise. I don't platinum games. And I beat SMT5 3 times and got all the routes and got the compendium, the whole shebang. So I had to tell myself which one of these is number 1. Now, what I did in order to alleviate this, because I was kind of having a very difficult time choosing between the 2, I went ahead and set up a more traditional numerical value for these games. And I kind of want to walk you through my decision process here. When it comes to combat, SMT5 is a 10 out of 10 to me. We all know that the press turn battle system is my favorite battle system in any turn-based RPG. It's pristine, and SMT5 improves on that formula. The only thing I'm still kind of iffy about is making it to where buffs and debuffs only last a set amount of turns. However, I think in the long run, allowing buffs and debuffs to last a set amount of turns offers a little bit more depth to gameplay and just kind of keeps you more invested instead of throwing buffs up and debuffs up and just forgetting about them. So I think SMT5 took a nigh perfect combat system and found a way to improve upon it. Not an easy feat. In my opinion, SMT5 is the best playing turn-based RPG for combat ever made. I say that because Persona 5 is still and clearly tied for first as my favorite game of all time, and that's with Breath of the Wild. There is a lot more to me than just combat. Even though I do stress combat as my favorite system and part of video games, there's a lot more to the picture that kind of rounds out why I love games, as I think everybody does. Now, Tales of Arise hit it out of the park. I think Tales of Arise combat is a 9 out of 10. And I say that because it made the bold jump of moving from kind of a 2D plane, a pseudo 2D, 3D plane of fighting, and made it in a legit open feel arena 3D, 3 dimensions of movement action JRPG. And it crushed it. Tales of Arise has flashy pizzazz. It's fluid. The dodging mechanics with the interplay with increasing your power levels. It's gorgeous. Absolutely a 9 out of 10. The only reason I would probably hold it back a little bit from being a perfect score is because it can get a little chaotic and hard to kind of keep track of where things are at on the field. And that's just a side effect of incredibly cool, flashy, over-the-top battle animations. And that's a good thing. Okay, that's a good problem to have. However, that's what kind of held it back from a perfect score for me. Now, when it comes to story, there's definitely a different picture. SMT5 I rank as an 8 out of 10 For the SMT mainline series, I think SMT5 definitely hit the mark in making a great SMT storyline. It had a lot of connotations and similar thematic flow to Nocturne. I very much appreciated that. However, I think Nocturne did it better, and I give Nocturne a pass in having a little bit more of, let's say, droughts in storytelling, whereas SMT5 was great, but I didn't really feel that the side quests and other things that make up the bulk of the beauty of SMT5 storytelling with the demigods and the interplay and the power struggles between these deities, I didn't really feel it started to flex its muscles until later in the game. There's a lot of cool storylines between. However, when it comes to main cast, Nahabino's cool, and some of the bigger evil villains are cool that you meet later in the game. I really didn't care about the cast of characters. Miyazu kind of tugged on my heartstrings later on. Overall, there wasn't really much there to kind of keep me invested, which is just a testament to how fun the combat and world exploration was of SMT5, because I really didn't care, like, if I screwed someone over in SMT5, because, you know, you don't really get to know these characters that well. And I think that is kind of a hindrance to SMT5 when it comes to ranking. Now, for Tales of Arise, I give that story a 9 out of 10. It hits a lot of tropes, I get that. However, it hit it out of the park. Because even though the story is familiar territory, it kind of plays into my next ranking, which is characters. And I give Tales of Arise a 10 out of 10. The characters from Tales of Arise just absolutely meshed with me. They gelled with me. I loved them. I cared about them. I wanted to see them succeed and excel in life. I loved the chemistry between all the cast of characters. Absolutely loved it. And even though the story, which I rank as a 9 out of 10, was a lot of just a little bit of the same with a few changes in the formula, seeing the interplay between the characters and the story hooked me in and made my 60-hour run of the game whiz by. Had the time of my life with the cast of characters and the story mixed with that very pristine combat of Tales of Arise. Now, the characters in SMT5, I'm going to give them an 8 out of 10. And that is generous. I'm going to admit that is a generous ranking, but it's not for the main cast of characters. I thought the build up to the leaders of certain bad faction. Don't spoil SMT5 here. Let me just say this. There are deities later in SMT5 that have the myth and persona and the legendary status they have in their respective religions. That level of prestige, aura, and dread is manifested so well in SMT5. And for that, I consider those villains as the main characters of the game. And I think they absolutely steal the show within the world. I felt like the chaos and the law routes were really lackluster. However, the law story characters were fascinating to me. So I would say the law route characters and the demigods and the gods later in the game got for kind of characters I don't really care that much about. Now, when it comes to music, we're kind of in a dead heat here, because SMT5 I would give a 9 out of 10, and Tales of Arise I would also give a 9 out of 10. And that's because SMT5 has a very ominous, eerie feeling to it, and it hits those notes really well. The Nahabino theme and some of the other themes in the game are instantly iconic and just beautiful, beautiful tracks, even though they're a little haunting and eerie. So for what SMT5 is hoping to achieve, the music and score definitely excelled for me, and I would give it a 9 out of 10. Now for Tales of Arise, I think the main theme from Tales of Arise sometimes it can just hit me right in the feels. I can almost get choked up when I hear that second opening theme. Oh my god, it's like right at the interlude or the midway point of the game. It just really helps wrap together this kind of orchestra of just feelings that you just got hope. There's a lot of danger going on in the story. You don't know what's going to happen. There's a lot of, but you're banding together with that friendship. Yeah, a lot of tropes, whatever. I don't care. It was friggin' fantastic, and I thought the music of Tales of Arise is right on point, so I'd give it a 9 out of 10 as well. Now, lastly, the big thing for me when it comes to video games, because I like to get a lot of value for my money, because I'm not somebody who just buys games and puts them on the shelf. If I buy a game, I want to not only play it, I want to beat it. So sometimes I can err on the side of beating a game I don't enjoy. However, if a game has replay value, that to me is extremely important. It's one of the reasons why the Souls series, Breath of the Wild, and even Persona 5 are some of my favorite games, is because you have so many different routes and options and directions you can take the story and the gameplay. SMT5 is packed to the brim with replay value. Obviously, I've beaten the game 3 times in just the month I've had it, and I cannot tell you enough that each of the routes, even though they follow a lot of the same tracks, where the replay value comes from is how you build your team, how you explore and build your own character. Do you want a strength build, a magic build, a support build? Whatever it may be, you can craft the playthrough you want. And that's underrated these days because, you know, in a world full of just game after game after game, there's a lot to choose from, a lot to play from. Replaying games is something that's becoming more and more scarce for me. SMT5 does not suffer from this problem. It gives you nothing but replay value, and that's a 10 out of 10 for me. Tales of Arise, I am going to hinder this one back a little bit because after I platinumed the game and I had this wonderful, perfect, beautiful experience with the game, I was done with it. I do want to go back and kind of re-experience it again just so I can kind of go through that beautiful story again with the characters, with Alphen, Xion, Kisara, all of them. It's just a wonderful experience. So I gave that an 8 out of 10 because you can build your characters differently. You can kind of explore different progression paths to get to that point, but it's not in the same league as SMT5. So with that, that's where the 8 out of 10 came from. So I did this list, and for those of you who are keeping math at home, you might realize the problem I had as well. Both of these games came to 45. I'm not going to lie, I was pretty depressed when I saw that because I thought it was going to be so easy for me, but obviously it's not. So when it comes down to it, I think they both excelled and were glorious titans of their respective genres. However, at the end of the day, I don't want to just cop out and leave it at that. I want to feel your hand right now. You are the place, my only home. The overall story and presentation of Tales of Arise puts it above SMT5 for me. And as much as I love replay value and as glorious as the combat system is from SMT5, I will look back on the cast and story and the interplay of the combat systems and the whole package of Tales of Arise with just more fondness. And for me, Tales of Arise is Game of the Year. It was a very difficult list. I hope you can in some way see my thought process in this and how I came to my conclusion. However, this is just me. This is just a personal list. I would love to know what your Game of the Year is. And if your Game of the Year didn't appear on this list, it's probably because I didn't play it. So let me know and I'll definitely check it out. Like this video if you liked it. Thank you so much for subscribing and stick around for more JRPG and Metroidvania content. And until then, I'll see you all next time.